Welcome to the Weekly Roar, coming live from the Lion's Den, helping new managers become great leaders and awesome bosses. And now, here's your host, Greg Storch.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining me today. Welcome to the Weekly Roar. I'm Greg Storch, owner of Lion Enterprise, host of the Weekly Roar, and the founder of a worldwide barter coaching program called The Helping Hand. I'm a certified professional leadership coach and a certified leadership speaker and trainer. Now, on today's episode of the Weekly Roar, I'm talking about some of the things that I've learned, not from observing great leaders, but from watching bad ones. Now, as someone once said, everybody has value, even if to serve as a bad example. So I'm going to share some of the value that I found through the bad examples of some poor leaders. So let's jump into this and talk about bad leaders, good lessons. Now, last Friday, my wife and I were out to dinner with another couple, and we got onto the topic of poor leadership. And during the conversation, my friend said, I've learned more from bad leaders than I have from the good ones. What a great quote. I even wrote it down in my phone. Most people I know tend to take their cues and learn from leaders who they consider to be good at leadership. We hardly look for bad examples to learn what not to do from, but that's just it. We can learn just as much from the leaders who aren't so good at it, just as much as we can from the ones who are good at it. Dealing with a bad boss who serves only as a good example of bad behavior can actually provide us with opportunities to find the lessons that will help us to do things differently. Somewhere in all the craziness of that poor boss who doesn't want to be leading people in the first place lies some really great lessons that can help us to develop our own leadership skills. Lessons learned as what not to do are hard lessons to learn because we have to live through it. But if we change our perspective about what's happening, we can find value in those who are setting a bad example. So after my conversation with Steve last Friday, I spent the weekend thinking about some of the not so great leaders that I've had in my lifetime. And here are some of the things that I've been able to use as what not to do that ended up making me a much better leader. Maybe a bit counterintuitive, but valuable nonetheless. Have you ever worked for a boss who had the attitude of, it's my way or the highway? That can be frustrating, to say the least. Having a manager like that makes their employees feel unheard and dismissed. It's this one-sided point of view that taught me a valuable leadership lesson. And that lesson was how to have the right perspective. A well-rounded vision is always better than a narrow point of view, wouldn't you say? If you've ever had the displeasure of watching a leader of yours in action who has the wrong perspective, it probably didn't take you long to see why it's important to try and see situations through the eyes of others. As leaders, our ability to put things into perspective can help us realize that there's more than one way to view a problem. And if there's more than one way to view a problem, then there's probably more than one way to solve it. But more importantly, when we develop the ability to change and develop our perspective, that's key to understanding people better. Now, here's another lesson I learned from a what not to do situation: the importance of gratitude in our leadership. A lack of gratitude, even through a simple thank you, can leave followers feeling underappreciated and overwhelmed. It certainly doesn't bring out the best in those under our leadership. I once worked for a leader who consistently failed to provide recognition to others and just expected for them to do as they were told. He obviously forgot that leaders are supposed to make those around them better. The team he was leading quickly disassembled and they left the company one by one. Since then, I studied a little more about not only how to show appreciation for others, but how to show authentic appreciation for those I lead. I read some great books on the topic, like The Vibrant Workplace for Building Cultures of Appreciation and The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. Seeing what not to do opened my eyes to the negative impacts of not being grateful for those around me. Here's the thing. It's easy to see when a leader has a lack of appreciation. Everyone around them can tell. It certainly doesn't bring out the best in those under their leadership. That's another bad leader providing me with a good lesson. Now, when it comes to being a good leader, humility is one of the characteristics needed for that. There's nothing worse than having an arrogant leader, and the only good that can come from it is an example of what not to do in your own leadership. Humble leaders understand that they're not the smartest person in every room, and they don't need to be. You know, my mentor, John Maxwell, always says that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. The great thing about having humility as a leader is that we can learn to respect differences of opinion and we can support the best ideas, even when they aren't ours to begin with. At the end of the day, we can always elicit better responses to our influence by being a little more gentle in our approach and not walking tall with a big stick. So, believe it or not, the arrogant leaders I've had in the past have taught me the importance of humility in my own leadership. Now, I have to tell you about the bad boss of mine who just wasn't up to speed on being a good leader. In simple terms, he just didn't know how to develop himself as a leader, let alone the leaders around him. If you've ever experienced that, and who hasn't, right? Then you know that when I tell you that having to constantly deal with leadership that isn't up to par can definitely teach you a lesson on how to roll with the punches. It's a lesson in the importance of resilience. And as hard as it was to go through the experience to learn this valuable lesson, it's one that has served me well in many areas of my life. Resilience is what gives us emotional strength to face the hardships in life. It taught me how to lean on my resources, tap into my strengths and my skills to overcome challenges and to work through those challenges, because when you work for someone who doesn't have what it takes to lead, you can't rely on them to help you do that. So I just want to take a second to say, thank you, bad boss. Thank you for helping me to build my resilience that now gives me the core strength to lift the load of life and to bear the weight of the world. You know, if you think about it, what a great quality for good leaders to possess. So those are just a few strengths that I developed because of my leaders' weaknesses. I learned the importance of changing perspectives to open possibilities, how to effectively show my gratitude for others, and why it was important to do it. I learned that humility was important and that it didn't mean I was weak because I was humble. And maybe one of the most important lessons was about being resilient. Resilience is definitely a required skill in today's world for leaders to develop. But I've also worked for leaders who couldn't handle pressure and took it out on everyone. I'm sure you've probably witnessed the wrath of a boss who came unglued at the slightest issue. It ain't pretty, is it? It's much easier to respect a leader who doesn't lose their cool, but calmly handles problems. So that bad leader taught me a good lesson about the need to stay calm. See, during times of crisis, all eyes are on the leader. If you stay calm, those you lead will stay calm. They take their cue from us. And finally, how about that boss that just didn't listen to their people? I've had plenty of those in my career. If you've ever had a boss who didn't listen to your ideas, then you know how important it is to be the opposite of that. Leaders are good listeners. They're really good at active listening, and that helps their followers know that they're being heard and that what they have to say matters. So my last thank you goes out to those former leaders of mine who never understood the importance of being a good listener. You taught me that I can always learn from others around me, and that when I do, I increase my leadership capacity through knowledge gained and perspectives changed. So I bet you never realized how many good qualities you can learn from working for a bad leader. Those were just a few examples of how I experienced a great deal of growth by serving with terrible bosses. It certainly isn't easy to work for people like that, but the lessons I learned, the lessons that you can learn, become assets to us in our own leadership. All right, friends, that's it for today. I'd love to hear what you have to say about your own lessons learned from experiencing poor leadership. So please feel free to comment below and share your thoughts and experiences with the others in the Lion's Den. And until we meet again, remember, be powerful, but stay poised just like a lion. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Weekly Roar live event at lionenterprise.com. If you enjoyed this video, please tell others to join us each week here in the Lion's Den. Thanks again, and see you next week.